Hello and welcome to Bitcoin with Jake. Today I'm speaking with Master Guantai. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Jake. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for welcoming me to your platform.
No, the pleasure is all mine, I can assure you now. So this is a show all about Bitcoin, as you can probably guess, and secondly about stories and people's personal journeys. And I love to ask like how they became who they are today. So to begin the conversation, could you explain to the listeners the projects you're involved in today? And then what we will do is zoom out a little bit and we'll work out how you became the driving force of the projects you're involved in at the moment.
Yeah. So right now, I'm the founder of Bitcoin Mtaani, and with Bitcoin Mtaani, the the sole purpose of Bitcoin Mtaani is to translate legitimate Bitcoin educational content to native African languages. So far, the languages we are starting with are respectively Swahili, that covers the East African region, and then we have Yoruba for West Africa, we have Lingala for Central Africa, and Xhosa and isiZulu for South Africa. So, like a good example of what you have already accomplished, you have translated the Bitcoin white paper in a multimedia format, meaning there is the actual document translated to Swahili, and then you have someone reading the voiceover of the same Bitcoin paper in Swahili. So what you get is an MP4 video, which is scrolling up, which you can both read and listen to. So we have done the Bitcoin white paper, we have done the translations on how to use the Moon wallet, and right now we are working with, we are partnered with CoinKite, and now we have translators translating tutorials on how you can use the ColdKite products, which are the cold card and the open dimes, and also like the seed plates to these respective African languages.
Wow,
Yeah.
fantastic. And to give a understanding of the scale of the amount of people that you're potentially now giving access to this information, of the languages you mentioned, how many people does that include?
Just to give like a good example for East Africa, when you say Swahili, Swahili is among one of the most widely spoken African languages in the world. So when you specifically zoom in to Africa, other than people living outside the East African region, and East Africa includes Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and Ethiopia, you have a population in Kenya. To give you some context, in Kenya, in the educational system, it is mandatory for you to learn Swahili. There are only 3 subjects which are mandatory in school. We have mathematics, English, and Swahili. So to give a brief context, it's like Kenya has a population of right now about 45 million people. Tanzania has 3x that, and Rwanda and Burundi, like they are smaller countries, so let's say 10 to 15 million people each. So in the broader context, when it comes to Swahili only, in East Africa, you're looking at more than roughly 160 million people. That's
Wow.
not to mention the people in the States or in Europe or
Yeah.
in other African countries who speak Swahili. So
Wow.
when you go to West Africa with the Yoruba language, the population of West Africa is like 10 times that of East Africa, because you have
Wow.
the most dense populated country in Africa is Nigeria.
Yeah.
So when you have those countries like Nigeria, Senegal, Cameroon, and all those West African countries, now in West Africa with the Yoruba language, you're talking now of upwards of 300 million people who
Wow.
can now have access to Bitcoin in the languages they primarily communicate in. on a daily basis. So they are in a position to now understand Bitcoin more deeply as compared to listening to an English or French podcast,
Yep.
because the language they're being given the Bitcoin content in is what they understand the most.
Wow.
So with Bitcoin Mtaani only, we can do like a rough approximation of, like, basically with those 5 languages, of upwards of 500 million people.
Wow. It's a huge number, isn't it? I mean, come on. It's
Yeah.
incredible to hear. Wow. And I mean, I confess, I was born in England. I speak only English to a fluent level. I speak some other languages, but not very well. And the idea of learning about Bitcoin in French, which is probably my second best language, is still like, no way. Like I couldn't handle that. So trying to trying to conceive what it would be like the other way around, and the only content I can consume is in a language where I maybe half understand what is being said. That would make it a real challenge. So, yeah, what an amazing project. Um, can you tell me where the idea for this came from? So, you must have seen this problem on a day-to-day basis, perhaps, and talk to me a bit about the beginning.
The the idea for Bitcoin Mtaani basically came about for me going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and understanding that I'm privileged enough to read and talk and speak in English in a level of fluency that enables me to watch the Apomp podcast episode, or what Bitcoin did, or even like read a book like the Bitcoin Standard and fully understand and comprehend what Bitcoin is all about and what it has to offer Africa. So in that light, I was very cognizant that most African countries, the educational standard is not very good. And that is solely based on corruption by African governments, so that very many citizens who go to just the government schools, you cannot say they are very articulate or very conversant with the English language or the French language that they study in school. So, bearing that in mind, I just came to the realization that the people who need Bitcoin the most are just the local person in Africa, compared to the local person in the street in Africa needs Bitcoin more than someone in, let's say, a European country or in America, because like certain European countries and in the States, like citizens have certain social safety nets, which are not available to in most African countries. And then when you look at how governments are failing their citizens, the level of corruption, inflation, lack of opportunities, like among the youth being like 70% of the population, but at the same time, they have like zero representation in government, and there's unemployment, even to those who have had the chance to even go to an undergraduate program, go to university, have a degree or a master's degree. You find that very many Africans would rather consume, not even would rather, if this content would be articulated to them in the African languages that they understand and communicate in daily, they would grasp this concept and what Bitcoin has to offer in a deeper way that, let's say, me and you can read a book and understand. So that is why I saw the need for this Bitcoin content to be translated to African languages.
Awesome. And so, Master Guantai, could you explain to me into some more detail? So, life in Africa, I'm sure it's different from country to country or from language to language.
Yeah.
The use case for Bitcoin is fantastic. It's a an amazing technology, but it's often not really described, or I like to think of it as solving different problems for different people.
Yes.
So can you just talk me through the very basic situation that, people you've met face on a day-to-day basis, and how Bitcoin might solve some of their problems?
The Firstly, Bitcoin solves the problem of bad leadership in Africa. And when I say bad leadership in Africa, basically after colonization, what happened is that certain Africans came to power, and Africans at different countries got independence at different times. But the prevailing situation is the Africans who came into power did not keep their word to develop their respective countries to bring positive social economic impacts to their citizens. What ended up happening is they borrowed money from Western countries and other international organizations and decided to enrich themselves with some of their elitist friends and maintain their power either by force or by being more manipulative by changing constitutions and everything to make sure that themselves, their family, and themselves and their friends stay in power. So what that directly means is in a country like Kenya, the central bank governor is a presidential appointee. So to a very big extent in African nations, the monetary systems are very highly manipulated by the governments. And unlike in the West, whereby like the court systems work and like people can demonstrate and be heard, in most African countries, when there's a problem and citizens seem want to articulate this and this problem to government, and they choose maybe to have a peaceful demonstration, they'll be arrested, they'll be beaten and everything.
Wow.
But with Bitcoin, now you don't have to, you can be a Kenyan citizen like myself and don't have to care about a new president coming in, changing the monetary system, using his elites and everything to benefit them, or the exchange, manipulating the exchange rates, or things like that. You can be self-sovereign and be sure that there is no leader, there is no organization that is beyond your grasp, is beyond your reach, that will steal your value and your time. So when it comes to Africa, like sovereignty is like comes first and foremost, and that is like the biggest problem that I can say that categorically like Bitcoin fixes this.
Boom. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I must say, I grew up in the UK and now live in Australia. The Western countries have also got big problems along these lines, and sovereignty is actually not something they're interested in giving their citizens. But of course, in Africa, it's a different game altogether. Thank you for sharing that. It's brilliant to hear you describe that situation, and it's clear you've spent a lot of time thinking about Bitcoin and understanding what it is and why it's important. I'd love to know, before you got into the project you're currently working on, and Bitcoin became such a big part of your life. You mentioned you're a Kenyan citizen, so you grew up in Kenya. What was life in Kenya like growing up, and were you always involved in education perhaps, or how did Bitcoin become a part of your life?
No, for me actually my story is, yes, I was born in Kenya. All my life I've studied in Kenya, but when I went to university, I decided to not finish my undergraduate degree and join the Kenya military. So I served in the Kenya Navy for for four 4 years. So I was an officer in the Kenya Navy, and I was my specific department was the military police. So after doing that, because I joined at an early age, like when I was 21 years old. So like when I was leaving, I was like roughly 25 years old. But I had already decided even before leaving that I want, I don't want to be a lifelong military officer or official. So I decided like what I want in my life is to learn a skill whereby I can be in a position to work from anywhere in the world and not like have a boss per se who's like breathing down your neck, because like when you're in the military, your boss is your boss. You can't ask questions or anything of that nature.
Whoa, I can only imagine following orders at all time.
Yeah. So I just through a family friend, I came to learn about forex trading.
Okay.
So like I really took the time. I took like 3 months straight. I'm not even like sleeping, like writing down notes, understanding what is this forex market and everything, like the charts, technical analysis, fundamental analysis. But at long last, when I decided to pull the trigger and actually have skin in the game by depositing $1,000 into an exchange and now trading, I quickly realized that there are people like on YouTube and online or certain like documentation you can get, which says if you employ a certain strategy that maybe you'll make profit or you're supposed to do this and this, but at the end of the day, that knowledge was disingenuous
Yep.
because I ended up like blowing my account, thus losing all the capital in my account in like very short order.
How long?
But instead of giving up, I can say that I'm ambitious and like for me, I just sat down after that happened and I just decided that if there are certain people in the world that can do this, so why not me? So
Yep.
what I need to do is actually get better information to be in a position to trade better.
Yep.
So I scoured the internet looking for better information and things of that nature until by just sheer luck, I stumbled on a YouTube channel which is called No Nonsense Forex. So with the No Nonsense Forex, the the channel is really like legitimate, and there was a whole community across the world, and he had like 2 videos per week and one podcast, and there was also a blog. So I told myself, I'm not going to trade. I just want to learn absolutely how to do this the best, and I demo trade until I learn how to do it in a profitable manner. So during the course of that, like 1 year of studying, at the tail end, he started talking about not crypto, but Bitcoin specifically. So when he talked about Bitcoin specifically, and there's that trust because you can see like you are people from all over the world, and what you're getting over here is legitimate education, and it's like for free. So when he talked about Bitcoin, I'd heard about it, yes, but like in Africa, there are very, very many scams. So
Yep.
when I'd heard about it like years ago, but I didn't pay any attention. But when he started talking about it or in that forum, I genuinely got interested. So I started looking for relevant material to understand what Bitcoin is. So he gave like a couple of channels whereby you could go study. So one of the channels was like it's called the Pump Podcast. So I basically I've basically never been in the shitcoin casino. I started learning about Bitcoin like from the onset, and I really I really like saw the value in it from the get-go, because like for me up to the secondary school level, that is the level in Kenya where from there now you go to university. I
Yep.
had studied business education. So with business education, it reached when I started like studying about Bitcoin, I quickly realized that I had studied business education, but I did not have like I did not know a lot about our current monetary system. So like the Kenya shilling is pegged to the US dollar, but I did not know that the Federal Reserve is a private bank with private investors. So when I learned about that, like I got very like angry and like pissed off, like why like we have governments and America is a superpower and everything, and like we have courts, everything is supposed to be done in the right way. So why isn't this first and foremost taught in school? And secondly, why I'm not like an economics professor, but this is not making sense to me at all. So other than going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, I started like digging deeper to the United States like monetary system, like
Yep.
where does the dollar come from,
Yeah.
and
It's
then
so
you
interesting.
find
Like, what is this all about?
documentary that, yeah, and then like the Bretton Woods, like the meeting they had and what they decided, and like it infuriated me more, so it gave me more like motivation to now study about Bitcoin, because on one hand there's this monetary system which I've been forced to use since I was born, and it's clearly a scam, but this other thing is providing me with an alternative which no one can control. So that is what like triggered my interest, and that is how like I started like going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole.
And so, roughly, when was that then?
So let's say like 5 years ago.
About 5 years ago. Wow. Okay. And so, are you still a forex trader today, or you've left that behind to now focus just on Bitcoin?
No, like today I trade forex, but I trade it like on like me personally. I do not like I give like all my time to Bitcoin Mtaani and other Bitcoin projects. So I I may choose to maybe engage other people to trade for them and maybe get a commission.
Yeah.
But right now I only trade privately, and like I'm very grateful to that channel, because like I even got an opportunity to do like a technical analysis curriculum for training other like youth to trade specifically cryptocurrency or even forex, and like even just having the exposure to know like what are uh, like ETFs with and like CFDs. It gives you a wider scope of knowledge to be able to even understand, to be in a position to understand Bitcoin more.
It's so fascinating, isn't it? The internet has democratized the access to information to an extent that
Yeah,
people, it's completely and utterly incomprehensible how easy it is to learn today versus 20 years ago. Like, the amount that
yeah,
access to information has changed, it's unbelievable, the difference. And to hear your story, it's just another great story, right? You sit down, you get online, and you start learning, and it's incredible what you find out. For the listeners out there that don't understand FX trading, and for me to an extent, just teach us a little bit about how that actually works. So, what, when you're FX trading, what does that mean?
when you're forex trading, basically what it means is around the world, like every central bank fixes a rate for their currency on each and every individual day. So when you say you're forex trading, they are first and foremost, you trade one currency against the other. So if it's like in Europe you have the euro, and in the States you have United States dollars. So it can be euro USD. That is the pair you have chosen to trade. Out of there are like 27 pairs of currencies you can trade from different currencies. In Canada you have the cards, and but they're like the big currencies, and then you have like currencies from other nations which you can trade. But the thing is, you either go long one or you go short one. So it's either euro USD, it's either you're buying or you're selling. So the beauty about the forex market, like, it does not matter if the market is going up or the price action is going up or it's going down. The thing is, you can make money on both sides. You can make money when the currency, when the pair is going up or it's going down. But now the tricks lie in understanding, like, first, there are like two strategies you can use to trade. You can choose them individually with the weighting you want, or you can be very, very specific in which strategy you want. Firstly, there's the technical analysis part of the trading. So that means is whereby, like, developers develop certain indicators. They are called indicators, whereby, like, they look at the last, like, maybe 20 years and try to predict. Like, you have a software which can predict that the Euro USD will be going up or down. So, like, it can give you, like, the signs. You have certain signs. When you see this and this happening, you go long. When you see this and this is happening, you can go short. So that is basically technical analysis. When you come to fundamental analysis now, its fundamentals are what is happening across the globe. Like, when let's say when Elon Musk goes onto Twitter and says, I'm thinking about buying $1 million of Dogecoin. That means, like, a lot of people will just go and buy Dogecoin because they think the price will go up, just because an influential figure like Elon Musk has said that. So those are the fundamentals, like world news. Like, when you have elections, or when the governor of the Fed or something has a speech, or when non-farm payrolls come out in the States, things of that nature. So, like, you must balance between the technical analysis part of it, using the softwares to look at the charts, and now be, like, very observant of international news, and, like, comparing to what you are doing. Like, let's say in Canada, the economy is very heavily dependent on oil. So when you hear, like, OPEC, they have some news, or Canada has an issue, so they want to maybe reduce production. Those are the fundamentals you must be very cognizant of.
Cool. And so these, let's say, skills that you picked up from a YouTube channel, you mentioned it, No Nonsense Forex. There's a community
Yeah,
of people. You can immediately get involved, ask questions. It's actually, incredibly similar to obviously how Bitcoin functions in a way.
yeah,
You've managed to make a living out of this skill that you taught yourself, I assume, um, which is amazing, right? Like, when you're finishing your education, like, who am I? What am I going to do with my life? How do I understand to make money? These are all
yeah,
questions we have to try and solve, or answer. And so, yeah, great to hear that. Now, what I'd like to
thank
try
you.
and transition into then, Master Guantai. So, your, the comment you made just now about the Kenyan shilling being pegged to the US dollar. So you've got 45 million people or so, you mentioned, sitting in East Africa whose dollar is denominating the Kenyan shilling, which is the currency you use every day. I
Yeah,
think 4% of the global population lives in America. And there's a tiny percentage of that control the Fed, which, as you point out, is a private organization. So the decisions that this board of directors in the Federal Reserve make has knock-on
yes,
effects in villages in Kenya. Talk to me
yeah.
about the moment when you first realized that this was actually happening. You asked the question, what is the Kenyan shilling, and what does it mean if it's pegged to the United States dollar? What are some of the, you mentioned it made you angry. Just talk me through how that process went for you, and how you learned about it, and what you realized you could see every day on the streets.
Like for me, this has, like, two, let me say, three aspects to it. First and foremost, I was extremely angry because I quickly realized that the business education, the curriculum, which is being taught specifically in Kenyan schools, is not giving people the truth. Because why sit down and study something for 4 years and do exams, and this exam is going to determine the grade you get, so the course you'll do in university, and they do not have the decency to tell you the truth about the current monetary system. So that is like where the anger came from, because a lot of things in the curriculum to me are extremely irrelevant. And the curriculum, most
It wouldn't be the
curriculums,
only. It wouldn't be the only curriculum in the world that has irrelevant stuff in it. It's crazy, right? You suddenly start going, "What is this?" Like,
and most curriculums, like in African schools or even universities, like you can go to a library in Africa, like the latest of the latest book was written like in the 80s.
wow. Even
So
today,
that
so
is
they're
not
40-year-old
that is
books.
not yeah that is not in line with what is happening in the current society we're living in
Yeah,
internationally.
yeah,
So the anger and frustration was coming by just by knowing that you are not being given the whole truth, and this is school, because when you go to school, you have been told by your parents and the whole society at large, you are going to learn about how the world works and to be given skills in like everything you need in life. But to a very big degree, it's like wasting quite a few years of your youth in 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 an institution that is supposed to give you like some skills which like you really need in life, and they can teach you the truth if they choose, but they actually decide to give you disinformation and misinformation, because the people who decide what you learn in school are the people in power and their elites. So they go ahead to give you disinformation and misinformation, and then they also like are stealing money from these organizations. So like even basic things in school are not like you don't have the latest textbooks. The schools are not in line with like international standards, even like the desks or anything you're using, or like the blackboards and things of that nature. So the second aspect to this was the realization that the Kenyan shilling being pegged to the US dollar is a very, very big problem, because as a country, like every African country which has an independent president, they are a sovereign state. But now, how can we claim to be a sovereign state when the thing which is like most important, which is like our money, which like determines our even economic power in the world against other like countries, is pegged to first and foremost a country which you cannot tell anything, because there is like that power dynamic between the states and like African countries. Because if the states wants anything, they can use several measures to make sure that an African country is like get in line or comply to their interests. But for an African country to compel America to do something, it's close to impossible. So how can we say that we are sovereign and you can't even have an honest discussion with this other party, but them they can control you however they want, and you still choose to be in line with them? So the answer to this was categorically that very many African leaders choose to please America specifically, and other European nations and other international bodies like the World Bank or IMF, simply so that they can, year after year after year, they can go to them saying that as Africa, we have this and these problems. Kindly give me a loan, give me a grant, give me some money. I go do this and this, and then, yeah, we solve this problem, or you get this investment. But now, when the European country gives that money to the African country, these African leaders will go out of their way to steal more than half of that money. So the problem will not be solved. So in the long run, we have stayed with very many problems since, like, Kenya got independence in 1964. But
Wow.
for a country with like a lot of arable land, we export like literally everything: coffee, tea, pyrethrum. We can grow sisal. We have vast amounts of arable land. We have the manpower to like do, like, there is a good example in Kenya. There was a project called there was a food project which the government gave 1,000,000 acres to grow food. But all that project everything went into corruption, and that program is not a reality right now.
Wow.
So, like, even only food security, as per now, a country like Kenya should not have to rely to import anything. We don't have to import like toothpicks from China. So
Yeah.
all of this is based on poor leadership. So how can I trust this leader who our hospitals are not working, we don't have food security, like everything is a problem. The youth don't have jobs and everything. No, he's the guy who I'm relying on to choose a central bank governor and to give me a good monetary system. Like that does not make sense. So at the end of the day, if there is an option for each and every Kenyan who chooses to recognize and see the problem and see this other monetary system is a solution, now we have a solution, which you do not have to ask permission from this leader who you don't even have access to in the first place. So that is why I saw like the sovereignty part of it coming in, because accounts can be frozen. uh, there's a lot of KYC, AML, which is totally unnecessary. Like if I did, like let's say if you gave me a job to edit your podcast episodes for you, and I do that for a whole month, and then you decide to send me money more than $1,000, I would have to go give my full names, my ID number, my street address, where I stay, and everything, which is totally unnecessary. If you send me 1,000,000 shillings in my bank account, more than 1,000,000 Kenya shillings, which is roughly $10,000. There's a lot of things which come into play, and most of them are manipulated to the government's favor. For example, we in Kenya, the equivalent of the IRS in Kenya, it's called the Kenya Revenue Authority. Like they want to poke into your life to see how much tax they can get from you. And at the end of the day, they never get enough tax for even the government to do
Yeah.
like their budget. And like part of our budget is given to us by the IMF.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And then now like 70% of our budget of Kenya's budget goes to recurrent expenditure, which is categorically a government with too many unnecessary people.
Yeah.
With a country of 40 million people only, we do not need 47 governors. I don't know how many senators, what.
Yeah. Yeah. The,
So we
the
are
the the
wasting money
governments
we
have
do not
become
have.
very,
Yeah,
very bloated and big.
yeah.
Um,
And then
wow.
now we have to go borrow money from the IMF, and then they have to give us like stringent, like when it comes to COVID-19, the government must follow hook, line, and sinker what they have to say, instead of like actually looking at what are the situations like related
Yeah.
to this pandemic and how we can solve it. They're just waiting to be given instructions by them so that they can implement to us, so that our leaders can get money from them, so that they can steal that money.
Wow.
So these leaders cannot be trusted in any way,
No,
shape, or form to have my best interest at heart and give me a viable monetary system. So, like with Bitcoin, you don't have to go through all of that stress, all of that hassle.
it's very interesting because in my day-to-day life, well, the reason that I'm so interested in Bitcoin is my father died as a young man, and I
So,
inherited some money. Yeah, thank you. And so 10 years ago, I started trying to understand how to keep value over time. And inflation is a bitch. Even in Western democracies, you've got to hit certain
Yeah.
targets that your investments have to recoup in order to stay with the same purchasing power. And investment equals risk. Some investments have gone well, some have gone very poorly. Thankfully,
Yeah.
during this process, I've come across Bitcoin and I've realized that actually you don't need anything else. You just have to buy Bitcoin and you store value over a long term period. Um, Without talking too much about myself, the interesting part of all of this is I spend a lot of time on a day-to-day basis trying to sell Bitcoin to people around me, like friends and family, and they just don't really see a problem, if that makes any sense. They live in Western country like Australia or the UK, and they have a wealth manager, or they can buy equities on a online platform, or whatever the case might be. Whereas the story you're telling me is Bitcoin sells itself to the average Kenyan, which is very exciting in terms of adoption. And it wants to
Yeah.
nicely leads me to a question, actually. So, shout out to my friend Danny Brewster. He had a question for you. He says, "What is the biggest misconception of European, US based individuals about the adoption of Bitcoin across Africa?" So,
The
context being,
biggest, the biggest,
if you're sitting in Europe or the States and you're learning about Bitcoin, you don't understand why it's useful, etc. Like, what do you think the biggest misconception is about the adoption process across Africa?
like I can say, I can give two answers, which like I've experienced from, like right now, I've had the privilege of having several like meetings with not only investors, even partners, or even just friends. I right now have in the States, like purely because of Bitcoin. And like the two biggest misconceptions which keep coming up are, number one, the level of technology which exists in Africa currently. If I can expound in that to that point, number one, they don't think the proliferation of mobile phones in Africa is not that high. They think that internet connectivity in Africa is not that good. They think that like a lot of like the infrastructure in Africa is not like uh, like that great. So what I mean by this is like right now, we are doing this interview like on a Zoom call, right?
Yep.
Right now, I'm using Wi-Fi,
Yep.
and my Wi-Fi service provider, they are very good company. So when you come to like internet connectivity in Africa, like categorically in East Africa, or let me say like what I use on a day-to-day basis, like it's totally perfect. Like right now, it's lunchtime, like it's 1 my time, and it's during the day, it's sunny outside. But even if we were doing this interview at midnight and it's like raining, as long as maybe the Wi-Fi can be inconsistent a little bit, it can fluctuate. But if I use Safaricom, which is like the prevalent Safaricom, they're the owners of the M-Pesa platform. When they have a very, very robust network. So like in Nairobi, you can use 5G internet connectivity. And then like when it comes to things like electricity, the electricity grid in Kenya, like, yes, sometimes we have power shortages and everything, but like predominantly, let's say in a full month, like where power where I live is only serviced like 2 times, and they even tell you forehand. So like power, like the internet connectivity, those are great, like totally great. And then the other thing when it comes to the cell phone, like the number of people who have access to phones. I won't speak about laptops or like desktops or anything, but like the average student in a Kenyan university, let's say out like one in four, or like one, no, closer, like 1 in 3 has a laptop.
Yeah.
So when you say, when you put that into context and say, like, when you're in Kenya for $40 to $45, you can have a smartphone which has 4G internet connectivity, and
Wow.
the electricity is stable. And this phone with 4G mini connectivity, like, has a decent amount of space and like a good camera, like that. Obviously the same Apple Store or Play Store you use is
Yeah.
in Australia, the same one I use.
Yeah. It's
So
crazy, isn't it?
that being said, that's a very big misconception, that they maybe think that maybe in Africa a lot of people, or especially the youth, don't have like proper smartphones, because like maybe they think that like phones are too expensive for most of the people, or like the infrastructure in terms of just the internet connectivity or the Wi-Fi and electricity are not stable enough for that. So I think that is a very, very big misconception. And then the second point would be like the level of not really understanding, the level of exposure of most African youth and young adults. Like African youth in Kenya, you are a youth between 18 and 35 years, and then from that 5 years you are an adult. So let's say there is a very big level of misconception that Africans who are like between, let's say, 18 and 40 years are not that exposed to what is happening, like in the States, in Europe, or in regards to not even just, even if we put Bitcoin and like aside, like just the level of exposure of what is going on, like that is a very big misconception, because, and I think it's actually the reverse, because a lot of African youth like love a lot of things that happen in the West, but um, the average Western youth is more like 99%. They're just fixated on what is happening or in the West and in Europe, but don't really like understand or care to understand like what is happening in Africa. So when I say that, what I mean is, if I'm an African, if I'm a youth in, let's say, Kenya, obviously I know what is happening in Kenya and things of that nature. And then, like, let's say when it comes to entertainment, I'm on Netflix, I'm on YouTube, I listen to Spotify, I'm on SoundCloud,
Wow.
all these things that an average youth in the UK or in the States is using. When it comes to international news, like they're saying, like when the America has a cough, like the whole world gets a flu. So
Yeah.
like very many Africans are very, very much interested. You can just go to a place and people are speaking about Western politics.
Yeah.
Like you can even think that they have just landed from the States, that these ones are Republicans, these ones are Democrats. So they fully understand like what is going on with the Me Too movement, and things of that nature. So yeah, I think those are the two biggest misconceptions, whereby they don't realize how like progressive like
Yeah.
Africa is like at this point in time. Yes.
And so, if I could summarize that, it's technical proficiency and access to technology is much higher than what people potentially perceive when sat in the West, And the second
Yeah.
part of that being the general population is much better informed and in sync with what's going on internationally than what we realize.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, interesting insights. And so we've got another 10 minutes or so. So let's draw it back to Bitcoin Mtaani. Is that how I say it? Mtaani?
Yeah. Mtaani. It means neighborhood.
Mtaani.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. It means what, sorry?
It means neighborhood. Mtaani is
Neighborhood.
your neighborhood. Yeah.
Awesome. And so you first had the idea for this how long ago? Like how long have you been building the project for?
I've been building the project, let's say 2 years and some months.
Okay.
I took my time to really build it, come up with the proposal and everything. But the one thing, I didn't want to start small. So I actually had a budget and everything. So I started looking for investors.
Uh-huh.
So the thing is, when I started reading about Bitcoin and like I just decided to make Bitcoin my life. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I just wanted like I have like I just knew that I could add value, and it is like a dynamic new industry in the world. So that I knew I just want to work in
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
I know the
So
feeling.
when I got rid of all my social media accounts and started like Master Guantai across all platforms. So when I say I started looking for investors, what I was predominantly doing is I watch each and every day. I watch like a minimum of 3 podcasts. So when maybe I'm seated down with I sit down, I watch a podcast with Pomp and Michael Saylor. What I go do, I follow him on Twitter. I connect with him on LinkedIn and just write a message of thank you very much. I watched this and this podcast of yours. I learned this and this, and like yeah, I'm so and so from Africa, and I'm really interested in the Bitcoin space. So when you do that, like for let's say 3 years or so, you start developing like very good connections.
Yep.
Like on Twitter, like let's say out of 1,000 people you have DM'd or retweeted or text or whatever, even if 700 of them will not get back to you, the even the 50 who do are people who have been longer in the space than you.
Yeah.
And in due time, they'll see that, yeah, you are a Bitcoiner, and you'll engage further and further, and you'll come to know people. So on the lists, I used to, everyone like who is a Bitcoiner and maybe they have like on their bio, they rate their investor or something. I used to make a list of that along with other lists. So when I came up with a full proposal and everything, I just started contacting them through different platforms. So when I did that, like I was very honored to like Bitcoin Mtaani like is now like fully funded, and like just to have an investor like Galway Money is a very big privilege because they are Bitcoin only company, and like we have a very good working relationship with them.
And so just teach me a little bit about the business model then. So when you're translating Bitcoin content into African languages, like you mentioned, how do you make money
Yes.
doing that? And so when you're looking for investors, like what was the pitch and how did you go about that progress?
The pitch basically is all the investors I have, they they are very hardcore Bitcoiners, and what like the first thing I used to tell them, and I tell them to date, is like very many of the Bitcoin only companies have to this, let's say up to last year, they have been very, very much concentrating on the European market and the North American market, and totally ignoring like Bitcoiners in Africa. So my pitch was basically that like it has come to a time that like Bitcoin adoption, if you want like if we are talking about this whole hype about hyper Bitcoinization, Africa cannot be left behind. And it has, even from a business perspective, like when you talk about monetization, like I have the privilege of working with CoinKite. So the thing is, CoinKite have really supported Bitcoin Mtaani because they even send us like the hardware wallets to give to translators to do the translations and everything. And like from a financial aspect of it, for a company, for any Bitcoin company to grow, if it doesn't matter if you're selling socks or you're selling hardware, cold storage devices, you can only sell so much in Europe and America. Like if you do collaborations and partnerships and sponsorships with African Bitcoin companies like Bitcoin Mtaani, the more the people in Africa understand Bitcoin, the more Africans who will onboard to the Bitcoin standards, and the more your client base expands in the world. So by even the sheer population in Africa, it makes business sense to collaborate with other African Bitcoin projects, because at the end of the day, Bitcoin Mtaani will do the education part of it and will translate the content. But all Bitcoiners around the world realize that the best way to store your Bitcoin is on a hardware wallet.
Yes.
So eventually, all Africans in Africa who onboard to the Bitcoin standard at one point or the other will need a hardware wallet.
Yep.
So that is why when you work with certain companies like this, they fully realize that Africa, they cannot afford to leave Africa behind in this like monetary revolution that we are currently having.
Wow, it's so cool, isn't it? The process of buying some Bitcoin, storing it in a self custody solution, whether that's CoinKite or however else you might choose to do it. No one can access that Bitcoin unless you have the key. Like that's the
Yes.
end of the story. And it's I actually think probably the most undervalued thing of Bitcoin, the undervalued part of it. Um, people haven't yet understood that yes, there's short-term volatility, but that short-term volatility, in my opinion, is outweighed by the fact that you have total control of where your money is and how you can send it anywhere. Like just today, I was trying
Very,
to
very.
transfer money to a cryptocurrency exchange in Australia, and Westpac froze my account. For the scam team called me being like, we see some fraudulent activity going on, and they froze my account. I had 2.5 hours on the phone, like trying to get hold of the bank. Now, eventually, like I got hold of someone and they unfroze my account and whatever. But we're under this illusion that the
The
traditional banking
inconvenience, yeah.
system is
Mm,
our money, but is it?
yeah.
And it's so interesting. Wow. And so what you're really explaining is that Bitcoin Mtaani can become a brand that helps educate people in their native language. Through that, you build a community, you build a relationship with people, and then you can have brand affiliations with any number of company in the Bitcoin space that might be selling hardware wallets, they might be selling t-shirts, they might be selling, it doesn't matter, right? But if you sell it through your platform, then you might get 10% or something as like a
Yeah,
royalty.
yeah, we have
Brilliant.
those codes, and that when it comes to even other collaborations, like I can tell you this past weekend, uh, I don't know if you're familiar with the Built with Bitcoin Foundation.
No, I'm not. No.
The Built with Bitcoin Foundation was basically started through a donation by Ray Youssef. He's the CEO of the Paxful Exchange.
Okay.
So the director right now of the Bitcoin Foundation is called Yusuf. So they have actually built a school using Bitcoin donations in Africa. They have a school. They
Wow.
have schools in Nigeria. They have schools in Ghana, South Africa, Rwanda, and they have a school here in Kenya in Makueni County. So that school is in a very like rural part of Kenya. So we have like a collaboration and partnership with the Built with Bitcoin school. So this actually this weekend on Saturday, the 2nd, we actually organized a tour. So Yusuf, he lives in the States. So he actually came to Kenya. We had a Bitcoin meetup on Friday evening. We had dinner. People introduced themselves. So I chose a group of 10 people with, like, they are Bitcoiners in Kenya, but they come from very diverse like backgrounds. Like you have a lawyer there. You even have uh, like someone in the podcasting space and such kind of people.
Yep.
So we had a very lovely dinner on Friday evening, which was the first, and then on the 2nd, we took a van and we all went there. We spent time with the kids. It's like a
Wow.
kindergarten with a
Wow.
primary school. So we had lunch. We played with the kids. And then we divided them into 3 classes with their parents and some community members, and we had like brochures, and we explained to them what is Bitcoin. We listened to questions, we answered questions and everything. So like it's really wonderful to see such an initiative based on Bitcoin donations happening in Kenya, in such a rural part of the country where even the county government does not have, like, they have not built enough schools for this, for the children in that community. And even like the best of the best part is the school has a water project, because in that rural part of Kenya, in that county, if you want clean water, there you still have to go like very, very far away to on foot to go and like buy water, or you still have to go to the river to get water. But now in that school, they have like a whole water tank and everything, and they clean the water and everything, and that is available to the community.
Wow.
So that is one of the projects that I'm involved in Kenya, which I'm extremely passionate about, because you can really see this positive social economic change that Bitcoin is bringing to a community, which is like the very rural and disenfranchised by their leaders.
And in that case, was it so it was Bitcoin was sent directly to a wallet of some form that was controlled by the organization you mentioned was built with Bitcoin, and from there they can then pay to build a school or pay for teachers or create clean water, whatever the project might require. Is that right?
Yeah, the funniest thing about it, they were doing like it was like a business transaction. Let's say I'm buying something from you, or I'm
Yep.
paying for a certain service. So what actually happened to you today happened to Ray and happened to them, like those like what was happening. Ray made a payment to Yusuf
Uh-huh.
for certain services provided. So it was kind of a large sum of money.
Yep.
So now, Yusuf had to go back to him saying that the bank has refused to settle this transaction. They want more KYC. They're saying there's this and this problem and everything. So the money was actually reverted to the sender. So now the sender was like, now Ray, the owner of the CEO of Paxful, was like, do you accept Bitcoin? And at that point
Wow.
in time, Yusuf did not know what Bitcoin was. So he
Wow.
actually like orange pilled him and everything, and that is how the whole relationship started. And through that, like they were able now to start the Built with Bitcoin Foundation, and yeah, that's how it progressed.
And what I love about
Because
that is
yeah, yeah,
people are so smart. They're very resourceful. And when faced with a problem, which was I want to send value from X to Y, it didn't initially work. Okay, well, why do we
yeah,
use a different route? And that different route was Bitcoin. So what gets me
yeah,
excited is then how many people right now are faced with a financial system problem that is solved by Bitcoin. Like it's just so it's such a massive thing that's happening right now in terms of the adoption of this new technology. It's mind blowing what is going on around us as we speak. Oh wow, it's very exciting. Well, what a cool note to finish on. So, Master Guantai, so 1 hour has flown by. I'd like to close up if
Yeah.
we can. Do you have any closing comments? And equally, where can people reach you if they want to reach out and get in touch?
Yeah, first of all, yeah, you can always reach me on Twitter. I'm very, very active. As like any Bitcoiner, I'm literally addicted to Twitter. So at Twitter, it's at Master Guantai. And yeah, you can also reach me and come see what we are doing on our website, which is www.bitcoinmtaani.com. I hope because of maybe the spellings or anything, like Jake can put like the links on the
I
show
will. I'll
notes.
put
Or
it in the show notes. No
yeah,
problem.
so like you can go directly and visit me there. On the website, immediately it comes up, you'll see something, a WhatsApp like message where if you have any query. So if you write any message there, it comes directly to my phone so that we can speak through that. But basically on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, yeah.
Awesome. Well, what a great story. Keep up the good work. Let me know if there's anything I can do to ever help. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for your time. It's a true privilege to have to share my story to your listeners. And yes, like if any of your listeners want any further clarification about the Bitcoin scene in Africa or have any ideas for any project, like always feel free. I work on Bitcoin all day, every day.
Good man. All right. Well, thank you so much. Bye bye.
Yeah.